Alright, I wanted to make a video about what I have learned as a personal trainer with ankylosing spondylitis. Now, for those new to the channel, my name is Alexander Levine. I'm a personal trainer with ankylosing spondylitis myself, diagnosed in my 20s. I'm 36 now. I've had AS for a long time. I've been dealing with the symptoms for a long time. I've been a personal trainer for a long time. I've been a personal trainer since my 20s. When I was first diagnosed, I was already a personal trainer, and I was actually already working with a lot of severe arthritis because that became my interest because I started dealing with symptoms. I started dealing with sciatica, I had shoulder pain, I had mid-back tightness, and before I even knew I had ankylosing spondylitis, I wanted to work with others who were just struggling in fitness, struggling to get going, struggling to progress, struggling to work out without pain. That was the main thing for me because I was trying to work out. I was trying to do traditional things that I used to do before my symptoms came on, and it caused pain and a lot of suffering because that was my passion, was to work out, play basketball, jump rope. I was someone who, that was my whole life, and I couldn't do a lot of these things. So once I started to piece together my own routines and find some trends that worked for me, I wanted to apply that to others. So I started working with others who had arthritis, severe arthritis, through personal training. This was all in person. And, you know, when I got diagnosed officially and as the years went on, I started to specialize more and more in ankylosing spondylitis and inflammatory arthritis, especially when I turned to virtual personal training and I started my own business. So now that's really all I train is folks with AS and other forms of inflammatory arthritis virtually. So I want to share some of the things I've learned over the years because at this point, I've trained hundreds, maybe thousands with AS. I've talked to thousands with AS. On social media, in person, virtually. So I know a lot about it. I have it myself. And I want to share some of the things I've learned over the years that hopefully can help some people when they're thinking about fitness, thinking about how to progress things, thinking about how to get stronger, and mentally how to keep going with this when, you know, we have a flare, we're struggling. So the first thing I want to talk about is when I think about the clients I have now, the clients I have in the past, I have notes on notes on notes. Now, this starts with the first session. The most important thing to me is the first session with folks because we're going over health history. We're maybe seeing how the flexibility is, the posture, the alignment. We're doing maybe some strength assessments, but the first session to me is so important because we're going over everything the client's tried in the past. And I think it's so important to write all these things down, even if you're not working with a personal trainer. We want to pick up on trends. We want to pick up on what are some classes you've tried? What are some different exercises you've tried? What exercises have worked for you, have helped you, have loosened you up? What exercises are really hard for you? What exercises do you need to stay away from? So I do a very extensive, you know, probably like the longest assessment for any trainer in the world, right? Because I have this condition myself and I put a lot of emphasis on safety and making sure we're doing the right things for the person. A lot of the times I see in personal training that trainers are giving the same exercises to everyone. You know, we're going to do the top exercises, the planks, push-ups, deadlifts, squats, bench press. We're going to do the top exercises. And to me, there's no top exercises. I might have someone do workouts or exercises that another person might not do half of those exercises. It's going to be completely different. The amount, the reps, the sets, the type of exercises, because the main thing I focus on is how do we get more flexible? How do we get stronger? But also, how do we meet the client's goals? And that brings me back to the assessment. Goals are so important to go over. We're going over health history. We're going over what's worked in the past, what hasn't worked, what movements feel good, what don't feel good. But I think it's so important to have goals, and the goals can mean anything. One goal for me early on had nothing to do with how I looked. It really had to do with how can I work out without causing more pain? How can I just work out? Forget about getting stronger, forget about getting more flexible. How can I just do things that don't cause pain? So what does that look like for me? Does that look like using resistance bands, using resistance machines? How do I just do things that don't cause pain? So I think that's a great place to start. What movements don't cause pain? What rep range where we can just work through it and we're feeling good? So what movements don't cause pain? For me in particular, early on, I was doing a lot of just kind of mobility and stretching and alignment stuff. So I was working on positions on my back. I was lifting my feet up and putting it into a chair and working on tucking my low back into the ground. I was doing that against the wall, and then thinking about the alignment, thinking about getting some movement at a good alignment. And then I started using resistance bands, especially for the back because it was so tight and weights were just too much for me at the time. So I started gradually picking some things that worked for me. I started individualizing things. It wasn't about the deadlifts, the squats, the bench press, like I was saying. It was about, how do I just get some movement to all these different areas? So for me, I had to individualize things. I had to say, my hip flexors are really weak. My hamstrings are really weak. My back, I'm going to use resistance bands. My rotator cuff's really weak. I'm going to use some resistance bands for that. So I started to piece together some movements that just felt good. I could do them without getting too sore. And that's where I like to start with folks. What just feels good? What can we work out of? Now, the second thing, kind of trying to piece together the beginning part of the program. The second thing is, where are our discrepancies? So something I've seen over the years, everyone with AS has muscle imbalances. Everyone in the world has muscle imbalances, but for a lot of folks, it doesn't matter. For folks with AS, this can mean everything. So by muscle imbalances, I mean, we start moving because of the tightness, because of maybe sacroiliitis in the low back, SI joint pain, we start moving differently. Maybe one hamstring's incredibly tight. Maybe you have a lot of tightness on one side, down the back and the shoulder. Maybe your hip flexors are extremely tight. So where are the imbalances? Where are areas in the body that are really restricting us? Maybe the hips are really tight. It's hard to cross a foot over. Everyone kind of has, maybe you have tightness all over, but there's going to be areas that are much more tight and we have to be much more careful with. So this is what I always want to pick out of people. Sometimes it's the hamstrings, the hip flexors, the hips. Maybe it's purely the low back. You just get excruciating low back pain and you have started to arch your back a bit and you're kind of out of position. The alignment's all off. So it's really important to address these things, and for these areas, when we start thinking about exercises to address these areas, we have to be a little more careful. We have to have more options. For something like hamstring tightness, sometimes stretching the hamstrings can aggravate people, so we look towards more strength training, or we look towards more kind of nerve flossing. It depends on what's going on with the person, but addressing these areas is so important with AS, because if we don't, and this is what happened to me, when I was trying different fitness programs and I had these discrepancies, I had kind of the low back tightness, I had the hip pain and sciatica. So when I tried to do different classes, I would always irritate these things. So these things need to be kind of individualized and focused on for rehab, especially for me. Again, the rotator cuff, my shoulders were so tight, I had no rotation in the shoulder. So if I went to try to press weights overhead and I didn't have that rotation, it became very hard for me. It caused pain. Same with the bench press. I had a lot of shoulder pain because it was just a too vulnerable position for me. So what I did is I found different positions that worked for me to press. I rehabbed the rotator cuff. Same with my hips. I had to rehab the hips. I had to find ways to strengthen them without irritating them. So for some areas, we have to be a lot more careful than others, but we also have to focus on it. We have to, really carefully focus on different areas to make sure that we can get rid of these discrepancies. We can have the body catch up and everything can come back into equilibrium. So what training for me looks like, when we talk about, we have some of these areas that can cause more problems in other areas. And this is something I've seen, of course, across a lot of my clients, is we have the hips, the low back, and unfortunately what happens is it can get in the way of a lot of our training sometimes. If you're in a flare, if you're if you tweak that area a little more one day, or you're in a flare and the low back's killing you, the hip's killing you, a large part of AS is trying to determine, do we need to rest during that flare, or should we be doing other things? Can we find different options in fitness during a flare? And this kind of became my specialty because I'm someone who, I've always been a little more stiff and tight in the mornings. It's been harder for me to get going. Also, sometimes just my hips are bothering me. They're really tight, or my mid back's bothering me. And a lot of the times rest has not helped me in those particular areas. Sometimes obviously we need to rest during extreme flares and inflammation. But for me, I had to find ways to work out when I had some small things going on in the body. So my focus became, what can I do differently to work out on those days? So how do I work out when I have a little bit of hip pain or a little bit of low back pain, and how do I not make things worse? So that's where I started to piece together workouts that didn't involve the areas I was struggling with, and I was able to do things for the rest of the body. And that looks like resistance bands, machines. I use a ton of resistance machines for this reason. If my hip's bothering me, if I have sciatica, I'll go to the gym, I'll use machines, I'll be stable, I can go really slow, controlled with my repetitions, and that was a game changer for me. So some success I've seen from a lot of my clients is determining, what do we do when we have a little bit of something, but we want to keep moving? We don't want the whole body to get affected. We want to just kind of keep it to that area, and we don't want to make things worse, but we want to keep going in fitness. And that's where, again, fitness options, exercise options, modifications, finding things you can do on those days when you're really struggling. So AS is different than your typical person. You know, everyone, obviously, like we've talked about, is going to have times where they're not feeling as good energy wise. But for AS specifically, sometimes we're just not feeling as good. And I've talked a lot about this in the past, about folks who have tried different classes, personal trainers, physical therapists, and the program is the same. So when they're not feeling as good, they try to do the same program, and it causes pain, it causes a flare because they just weren't feeling as good that day. They were more stiff and tight. So we have to be able to adapt our program at any given time. We have to be communicative about how we're feeling. We need to really address how we're feeling every time we work out. And sometimes this can be a lot, obviously, mentally, but I just think it's so important that we're always adapting the program, we're always checking in on it, and we're always making sure there's no pain. Even if we've done things in the past in fitness that felt good, sometimes they're just not going to feel as good, and we have to adapt it, we have to change it, we have to maybe do less of something. So I just think that's a huge part of this, where generally most people would have a program, they do the program, they progress the program. That's our goal, but there's going to be small blips in the way where we have to adapt it, change it, maybe rest, and then we get back to it. So that's where our training kind of differs, where we just have different symptoms that change. That doesn't mean, you know, when someone's going through a flare and they have a lack of flexibility during that flare, it doesn't mean they've lost flexibility. So a lot of people ask me this, you know, can you just abruptly lose flexibility? You know, maybe temporarily because of the flare or the inflammation, you can feel a lot worse. It can make it so you're a lot more stiff and tight, but you haven't lost it. Once that flare's over, all the work you put in before the flare, you'll get back to where you were. It might take you some time. You might need to do it a little more carefully, but you'll get back to it. So that's where we have to address, during the flare, what's the best course of action? Do we rest? Do we try different things? Do we have to rehab some of these areas like the low back or the hips? It depends what's going on for the person. But overall, this is why I have extensive notes on everyone. All right, what is the rep range for this particular movement that we can build up? What movements don't feel good? What can we do when the person's struggling? What are really, really hard movements for the person, but they're really helping the person, but we have to do less of them to really build it up slowly. And lastly, I want to talk about soreness. So there's a lot of people out there, and this isn't going to be everyone with AS, but this is something I've seen over the years. Soreness, we don't do well with soreness. We don't do well with, say we're lifting 10 pounds, the 10 pounds, we've been lifting 10 pounds for a while. Say you're pressing 10 pounds off the ground. It feels good. It feels easy. You start increasing the reps, and then all of a sudden you say, I want to go up in weight. So instead of going up to maybe 12 pounds, you go up to 15 or 20 pounds, and you get incredibly sore afterwards because you just progressed way too quickly, or you weren't stretching enough after the program. This can have a huge impact because that soreness can sometimes lead to joint pain and can really kind of put us in a flare sometimes. So it doesn't mean we can't progress. We can absolutely progress, but we could do so at a little more of a slow pace. And I would say that for any person, even without AS, to progress at a slow pace, just to make sure your body responds well. But what I've seen is, us in particular, we do not do well with really ramping up things quickly. We like a nice gradual pace. We want to make sure the body responds well, cool down, warm up, cool down. We have a good stretching routine with the strength training. But one of the main things I see is the soreness we don't like. And obviously we don't like pain when we work out. There can't be any pain. There's got to be that perfect sweet spot of exercise where there's no pain. But the soreness factor is much more with people with inflammatory arthritis. That's why I tell people, let's start light. Let's start with resistance bands. Let's start with really light weights and just make sure your body responds well first. Even if it doesn't feel that hard, even if the workout doesn't feel that hard, that's how we progress it. That's how we put together the best program for you. So there's some differences with AS, obviously, and the general population when it comes to fitness training. Do I think that we can achieve incredible results in fitness? Yes. Most of my clients, all of my clients who stick with the program, are consistent, have gotten stronger, have gotten more flexible. No matter where their flexibility started at, they've gotten more flexible. Even if they have fusion, even if they just feel incredibly stiff and tight, we have learned to adapt and find ways we can get stronger and more flexible. But this takes listening into the body, keeping track of everything. And I think that's the main thing I want to end with, is keep track of everything. Keep track of how you feel, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And over time, you'll see some trends and you'll be able to pick up on things. And that's how we progress fitness. Let me know in the comments from you guys if that was helpful. If you're starting a routine with AS, if you're trying to get into a new program, let me know if that's helpful. Those are some of the things I've seen over the years with ankylosing spondylitis. See you next time.